Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Deborah Young and I'm the CEO of the RegTech Association. And before we get started, I wanted to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are all meeting today and pay my respects to elders past and present and offer a warm welcome to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander friends with us today. I would also like to offer a warm welcome to all members of the RegTech Association and to our special guests. Thank you so much. A little bit of background behind this RegTech Matters event. The program continues to go from strength to strength. Started out its journey as a sold-out event in Sydney some 6 years ago, where we had beanbags and standing room only around a room. And to give you some context, since 2020, the RegTech Association has had 20,000 people from more than 100 countries to events exactly like this one that you're attending today. This particular program plays a very, very important role in helping everyone understand RegTech, understand its application. It helps us to get an update from a senior regulator who will come along with their most recent regulatory information. And of course, our crowning glory, which is that we always invite two RegTechs to join us, and we have that in long-term member IDverse and our newest member Privy ID. We could not do these programs without our members and close stakeholders, so I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you all very, very much for joining us. For this particular event, we have had 195 registrations from 25 countries, and that includes 81 regulated institutions, 24 government regulators, 6 investors, and 73 fantastic RegTech companies. So thanks for making the time to join us from wherever you are coming from. Now, I just wanted to mention a few things in housekeeping, if that's okay. Can we go to the next? Thank you. Today will be recorded, and every registered delegate will receive a link to that recording. Those recordings are then stored on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go and take a look at this or any other earlier recording of any of our fantastic sessions, that's where you can go. If I could ask everybody to turn their mics off and turn your cameras off unless you are presenting, and I will invite each of the presenters to turn both on when they come up to the virtual podium. Thank you. We're going to offer that all questions be placed in the chat, please. And if the presenters are able to, we would invite the presenters to jump directly onto the chat to answer any questions. And if the need be, I can also curate those questions for the speakers. We will have some polling that will come up from time to time, and we'd really appreciate you filling in those polls because they help us with our future programs. And to our presenters today, I'd like to respectfully ask you not to go over your allocated time frame so that everybody gets their moment in the sun. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about the RegTech Association. Next slide, thanks. So we were founded in 2017. And what we have done is created a global community. It is non-profit and it is independent. So we don't represent any one firm. We represent the collective of those firms that you see listed on that map you can see on the slide. 160 organisations are members. I've already mentioned that we've had 20,000 people from more than 100 countries attend the program since 2020. And what our primary function is to lead engagement, to assist in collaboration between regulators, institutions, government, and technology companies. And we do that through programs just like this, through running events, through conducting research that we're going to talk a little bit about today. We do some consulting work, and we also do some trade enablement work for those companies that are looking to scale and grow into other jurisdictions. But importantly, we also have a global network, and we have signed MOUs with the global industry partners that you can see listed on the bottom of that slide. And so we work in collaboration with them to share research, to share thought leadership, to co-badge and co-design events and all kinds of things in order to elevate the RegTech conversation. Thank you, Nathan. Next slide. So one of the reasons that the RegTech Association was established 6 years ago was really to address an industry dysfunction, and that there was no easy path for a RegTech vendor to have a strategic conversation with a regulator or an institution or indeed the government. And so we really wanted to try and find a way of smoothing that path and elevating the conversation so that it was easier. I mean, typically back then, the only way a vendor could speak to a regulator or get free access to an institution was usually by waiting for the next industry conference to happen, and you would run into people in the expo space, or alternatively, it was through the hard yakka of door knocking and trying to get appointments. And so the association has really stepped into this breach to try and smooth that path between all of the counterparts. And in doing so, I referred back to that in my previous slide, in doing so, it has created this united voice that is focused on creating commercial opportunities, but not only commercial opportunities, it's actually to try and get some speed, so to accelerate adoption and to create a global centre of excellence. So when people in the world are thinking, where can I get great RegTech, they come to the RegTech Association, and we have all of those quality companies around us. Thank you, Nathan. So as I said, we are all about encouraging global collaboration, but in doing so, there was also a bit of a gap 6 years ago in that there was no logical order for RegTech. RegTech was just this big bucket of all kinds of different technologies, and there was no easy way if you were a buyer of RegTech to be able to approach that. So what we have done is we have created a risk-based RegTech taxonomy. And what that means is in the example, and we'll hear from some digital identity companies today, but in that example, if an institution or regulator was looking for digital identity solutions, they would have probably had to go out there and market scan and use quite a lot of Google. Now what you can do is you can go to the RegTech Association's member directory, and through the risk profiles, you can actually filter and sort on there to get your starting list of the vendors in that space. So it's done two things. It's helped bring the vendors closer to the customer base, and it has enabled that customer base to be working from a base pool of vendors right at the get-go. And so when we talk about acceleration of adoption, that's one of the first things, is actually working out, who can solve your problem. So creating that order and a logical approach to the industry was very important. Thank you, Nathan. And so in doing all of that, this encourages more seamless deployment of the solutions, and we're going to see a little bit about that in some of the research I'm about to talk about. But the number one goal for the RegTech Association right now is to safeguard consumers. It is really about as simple as your mum and dad have the right to have trust when they go about their business in the world. And how we'll do that is by having regulators and institutions enabled with the very best technology that they can safeguard the system and the people that work within that system. Thank you, Nathan. So late last year, and I'll introduce Tom in a minute, but late last year we conducted some global research, and we've been collecting this data now for about 5 years. You can see we had a bit of a glitch in 2020 when I think we were all hands at the pump around COVID-19 and the pandemic, so we didn't collect that year. But our mission is to accelerate adoption of RegTech, and so we're collecting data which on average suggests that from first conversation to full deployment of a solution, we have gone from, on average, 13 months in 2019 to 8.1 months in 2023. Now, this can be aided by a number of factors, as you would well imagine, but we think that education has improved, the maturity of RegTech has improved, institutions and regulators have a much greater understanding of RegTech and the capability that it has. And so we can see that we have achieved some acceleration in the adoption. On the bottom of the slide, I've also put down there as an interesting point in when we look at the kind of technology that supports RegTech solutions in order. Top tech deployed are artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing, and the fourth new kid on the block is Gen AI. And we asked that as a separate question, just so that it didn't get bundled in with AI. But I would expect that Gen AI will start moving up that food chain pretty quickly. It's coming up in all of our conversations everywhere, and watch for our programs because there'll be more to say on that. Thank you, Nathan. The Industry Perspectives report, called Industry Perspectives because what we did was we surveyed discrete groups, and there are a number of different groups, but the primary groups that we have high interest in are regulators, financial institutions, and then also the RegTechs themselves. And so what I wanted to share with you is some of those unique perspectives. So first of all, regulatory perspectives. The survey revealed a remarkable statistic that in the last 12 months, 80% of regulators that answered the survey have onboarded a SupTech or a RegTech solution in the past year. If anybody on the line is not sure what a SupTech solution is, we would just say it is a RegTech solution, but it is put in a regulatory use case, and the word SUP stands for the word supervisor. So often when we hear regulators talking about this type of technology, they will often use SupTech and sometimes RegTech interchangeably. 40% of regulators give high priority to RegTech and SupTech, which is a very, very encouraging sign. On the buy versus build, 60% of regulators prefer buying solutions from vendors, whereas 40% reported that they prefer to build their own. The top solutions sought by regulators are regulatory compliance risk, process risk, and data protection risk. And my earlier slide said that there's more engagement with the industry, and you can see that since 2022, of which, by the way, these reports are all on our website, and I'm sure someone from my team can pop a link into the chat for you. But there are more regulators engaging this year than the previous year, and you can see some of the numbers there. What we also did was we actually went out to those that are serving regulators, and we said, if your customer is a regulator or it's a central bank, we would like to ask you this separate set of questions. And what we can see is they answered around the product development trends. So when their customers from a regulator or a central bank are saying to them what it is that they need, you can see there that regulatory reporting came out as number 1, ESG reporting as number 2, and third was automation as supervisory processes and AML CTF compliance monitoring, equal third there. So that gives us a little bit of a hint as to what regulators are asking for. There has been a remarkable report of an increase in the appetite when serving regulators. And you can see that some of the significant drivers for SupTech and RegTech for regulators include regulatory, legislative, and compliance changes. However, like most of the perspectives in this report, you're going to see the number one challenge in dealing with financial agencies is procurement, some budget limitations, a lack of visibility on the priorities and the needs of regulators and central bank agencies, And also the market size of this sector is reasonably small. So this is not by any means everything that's within the pages of that report, just some highlights. So please do take a look at the report. Thanks, Nathan. So from an institutional perspective, the number one driver for RegTech adoption was customer-driven expectations. And that was really quite surprising to us. Maybe not so surprising when you reflect on it and when you think about the pressures on financial institutions at the moment, really on their customers. They're on a customer for competitive reasons. They're on a customer for safeguarding reasons because of the elevation in scams and fraud and things of that nature. Then also in Australia and some other centres, we've got the establishment of open banking regimes, which means that data is now portable between vendors, and there's privacy concerns and obviously just general data concerns around there. So it's no surprise, perhaps, that customer is number one. And so I think that this is a really interesting point that Tom and I will pick up again in a second. You can also see a little bit of a change here. Institutions are saying 40% are committed to buy off-the-shelf solutions, 20% committed to build, and 40% undecided. So they could probably have an each way bet. But you can see if you're a RegTech out there, it's very clear that they are looking for a dedicated resource for the deployment when it comes. That you are org ready, and that's probably that you've got your accreditations in place. You've done the IT security, and then thirdly that you're able to demonstrate a very strong track record, and that's why a lot of the programs that we do here at the RegTech Association really focus on track record. But one of the biggest challenges is budgetary constraints, and certainly they're a big challenge around doing proof of concepts. 75% expected their RegTech budget to grow, so that's great news. Now, depending on the size of the organisation could really mean a big difference here in what these stats mean, but you can kind of see about half of the survey respondents had allocated between 5 and 10% of their entire compliance budget for RegTech investment. So that's very good. And then another key thing here in these stats is that this whole idea now that the C-suite is now starting to hold the authority to make decisions around RegTech deployment. And that's a marked shift away from where we certainly were 5 years ago when the education wasn't that great. So the fact that that's up at the C-suite also tells me that these are boardroom discussions as well, which is a very positive sign. Quickly over onto the next slide. Now I'll be the one getting into trouble for going over time. These are the RegTech vendor perspectives. So if you're a RegTech and you answered the survey, here's what this revealed. The top risks addressed by the RegTechs that answered our survey: 51% compliance risk, 44% regulatory compliance, 27% AML, CTF and sanctions. This isn't the exhaustive list. The exhaustive list is in the report, but they're the top 3. The top functional roles. So what does the software actually do? 45% data compliance, 45% reporting, 36% implementation and governance. We have seen an uptick in the investment flowing into the sector. 68% of respondents reported inflows of professional capital. And since 2019, where 70% of RegTechs were bootstrapped, that is compared to 60% in 2023. And 68% had noted that they had attracted professional capital, and that was up by 7% from the previous year. So suffice to say, we are seeing some capital flowing in. The biggest challenge, guess what? No surprises. Procurement is number 1. Second one is client budgetary constraints. Third one is a bit of scope creep. And the current economic environment is also creating some challenges across the board. Because we did ask SupTech vendors, some those serving regulators, some separate questions, some of the insights from there. 68% of the vendors identify SupTech saying it's very important to their core offering, and they are predicting that there will be a likely increase in demand in the next 2 years, and areas being developed to meet that demand include regulatory reporting and ESG reporting. I think we talked about the drivers on one of the previous slides, and the top soup tech solutions, regulatory reporting, AML, and data management. Thank you. Thank you, Nathan. So what I thought would be really good is actually to go straight to the person that helped the RegTech Association analyse all this data. So if I can invite Tom Ball from EY in the UK. And the first thing I want to say is thank you to Tom for getting up very, very, very early in the morning. But by way of background, Tom is a partner in the financial services practice at EY, and he leads their FinTech sector growth focus for the UK. Prior to this role, Tom spent a decade in EY's strategy and transactions practice, working on a range of M&A deals for corporate and PE clients. Tom and the team from EY validated our data collection this year and have worked with us to produce the industry perspectives report that I've just referenced that we published recently. And as I said, we can probably pop a copy of that up in the chat if it's not already there. And I know that one will be included in the follow-up email. So welcome to you, Tom.
Thank you, Deborah. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Just before we get started, I might ask, there's somebody called Sean. I don't have your surname, but I'm just wondering if you can turn off your camera because we have a big black box sitting right in the middle of our screen. Let's see if Sean's listening. We're going to work out whether people are actually listening to. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate that. I did that as a test to see if you were paying attention. Thank you. So, you know, this fantastic report is so rich and full of information. But I wanted to kick things off and just share with you, Tom, what I thought were the most profound things that came out of it, and then maybe you can tell me what yours were, and then maybe we can have a chat. We can have a chat around those. But I think that the marked shift and the increase in engagement around regulators, so that whole regulatory piece was really profound, I think. Increase in the engagement that regulators are having with the industry, the increased appetite markers for RegTech and SoupTech, the fact that 80% of regulators have adopted a solution in the last 12 months says to me that there's a real shift that we are seeing here on the digital transformation journeys of regulators. And so I, you know, from my perspective, I think that was really the thing that really stood out to me as a bit of a marker, because regulators improving the way that they do things, regulators seeing the value that RegTech and SoupTech can play, really should stand up as a beacon to regulators now doing things smartly and more efficiently. And so that's a call out to the rest of the ecosystem that regulators are really taking all of this seriously and they are arming up. So you better be ready. So that was it for me. Is there anything that you would like to respond on that point? And then I'll ask you about what your number one thing was.
No, I think that is striking. I think there's data in there as well around the willingness of those regulators to kind of share learnings and data, you know, which really significantly stepped up. I think it was sort of 55% last time around you did the work in 2022 said they rarely or never kind of share kind of data with other regulators. That figure comes down to 20% in 2023. So there's a real kind of sense of kind of the global regulatory community working together on this topic as well.
Yes, absolutely. And so what was the number one call out for you? What surprised you?
I think the biggest one overall for me was probably the kind of the theme of demand in a broader sense. Obviously, lots of positive trends and potential here overall. But much as we like to follow the VC investment trends and other news that comes out of the sector, I think those signifies around demand. That's the real deal, because that's kind of paying customers who are going to put their trust in the RegTech industry to solve business challenges. And it's kind of a real validation that strategies are paying off. Often that involves some really hard yards around qualifying leads, educating buyers, really demonstrating the value and the proposition of the solution to a particular problem statement. Partly art, partly science. But that is now really paying off for the industry. So 75% of buyers expected their budgets to increase in the coming year. That's clearly going to help in an environment that is somewhat funding constrained, to kind of support and drive businesses forward. 60% of firms saying that they will increase their budgets for RegTech solutions that are either in trials or in deployment already. And that sort of demand theme, it resonated with what we're hearing from RegTech vendors as well. With 65% of RegTechs reporting increased customer demand or new opportunities. So as firms really convert that demand, build revenue, build experience, it really builds kind of proof points that carry the business forward.
Yes, indeed. So, like when we think about each of the groups that we surveyed, and perhaps we could start with regulators. What do you think the opportunities are for each of those groups facing into the future? So regulators, institutions, and RegTechs. What are the real opportunities, do you think?
Yeah, I think there's kind of probably a bunch of kind of standout themes that that came out of the work this year, including that interest in AI. Really was striking. Potentially expanding use cases around KYC, fraud detection, etc. And we've seen some significant funding rounds come through on the RegTech side. Recently, Aptus AI, Napier AI, both raising kind of large equity funding rounds, in the last few weeks.
Yes.
So that's significant. You mentioned open banking earlier. I think we've seen as open banking has developed and really now developing at pace, developing solutions that really kind of recognize that is a different kind of set of payment flows, different set of data flows, and kind of gearing up the kind of AML, KYC, etc. solutions around that kind of phenomenon. Feels like a significant opportunity to us. We here in the UK in particular, we have some very large, we call them TPPs, like third-party providers. It's the name for kind of open banking specialists. We've seen many of those firms recently RFPing for technology like transaction monitoring systems to support their financial crime compliance frameworks. Often finding actually the vendor landscape is not that mature yet in that regard, and doing a bit of kind of in-house versus buy for those kind of problem statements.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. But I think the one thing that's consistent, the consistent challenge with regulators and institutions is this question of procurement, and it's one that still hasn't really been solved. And since we started collecting the data in 2019, it comes up every single time as the number one biggest challenge, and nobody that I'm aware of has the answer to that. And I'm not going to pretend that I have the answer to it, but I do think that the RegTech Association could have a role to play in driving some change around this. I mean, we do hear from time to time about people that have a dual track procurement program, so one for the large end of town and one for the small end of town, but there's not enough of that. And if you're a scale up, and notwithstanding, if you were a startup, you can't die waiting to get through somebody's procurement program and throw all of your investors' money at actually trying to get through a bank's procurement. So there has to be a better way. I don't necessarily have the answer, but I think we have a role to play in maybe trying to get there. I don't know whether you have a reflection on that before we draw to a close.
Yeah, we just see this as a significant challenge coming out of the data as well. So 50% of RegTech vendors called out those kind of long procurement cycles as a key challenge in their businesses. Um, and it's one that has come up again and again in our own discussions with clients. And clearly there is a very high bar set for financial institutions in working with third parties and in needing to assess them robustly. That said, we often find the broader end-to-end process for engagement, can be quite disjointed.
Yeah.
Multiple decision makers and lengthy processes where it isn't always transparent, where firms are in that process. So I think things around, and we've seen some of this in the UK, improving communication and improving the transparency of that process can at least help firms to navigate it effectively. I think the other big thing we've seen work effectively is sandbox building. So we've there's an Aussie founder, Karen Jane, in the UK with a business called Nail
Yes.
One. They build sandboxes for banks in particular, so they can in a non-production environment quickly test RegTech solutions against their simulated technology endpoints and use some synthetic data in doing that. And that's a real route to at least accelerating proof of concept, proof of value ahead of full scale deployment, and it's just one kind of tool in the toolkit that can help with that challenge.
Yeah, that's a great call out. Well, we're probably at time, Tom, but I will take the opportunity to let people know that this week Tom and I and some others are recording a podcast on this same topic. So if you would like to hear some more insights, you can do so, and we will circulate that podcast as soon as it is. I think it's actually going to be on Spotify and the usual platforms. So we'll push that out to everybody when it comes down. But I did want to extend our very warm thanks to Tom, and thank you for getting up so early to accommodate the time zone difference. Thanks very much, Tom.
So thanks to you and the team, Deborah. It's been brilliant to collaborate on this project. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Mark Adams from ASIC. Mark leads ASIC's strategic planning and intelligence team within the Intelligence and the International Group. He's also ASIC's Regional Commissioner for New South Wales and leads ASIC's strategic planning intelligence, including ASIC's Innovation Hub and regulatory efficiency functions. Mark is a regular speaker at our programs, and I sit alongside Mark on ASIC's digital financial panel, the industry panel. And I'm delighted to have Mark here today to give us a little bit of a regulatory update. So over to you, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah, and good day to everybody. And I think my presentation will sort of resonate with some of the things that have already been canvassed and discussed. So just before moving to the next slide, just to remind everybody, ASIC is the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, and we are the sort of market conduct and capital markets regulator, as well as the corporate regulator. So we have a very diverse mandate. And my function, amongst other things, as you've heard, is to coordinate innovation through my role as the Innovation Hub coordinator. And that means we have a small team that involves engaging with a lot of FinTechs and RegTechs, but it works closely with our regulatory areas, so a bit of a hub and spoke model. And we also work closely with our internal digital transformation area, which I'll touch on a little bit more. And that draws that connection between RegTech and SupTech very closely together. So with that intro, maybe to the next slide, please. And a question for all regulatory agencies is, how do they approach the topic of RegTech? And this is varied across jurisdictions around the world and different regulators. But in our case, what we've been able to right size at the moment is that we give strong messages that we are supporters of the fact that we think RegTech has a vital role to play in helping businesses deal with risk and compliance issues. So the power of technology to support better outcomes for consumers and lift market integrity is a primary point for this. And therefore, we're really encouraging businesses to test, explore, and make use of technologies that can help them towards those outcomes. And as you've just heard from some of the earlier presenters, that is not necessarily an easy thing to do, but we encourage businesses to do that because really it needs to be compliance by design as much as possible. So there's an encouraging aspect that ASIC can do, but then what else can we do? So as part of our Innovation Hub function, we provide informal assistance to FinTech and RegTech businesses. So this is a mode of giving informal information and guidance to businesses, particularly where they might be raising regulatory issues. But in addition to that, we also liaise and we meet with RegTechs. So we have had quarterly RegTech liaison forums for some years now, where we provide a platform for industry and regulators to get together and talk about what they're seeing and what they're doing. We also open the door to enable RegTechs to come and speak to us about what their business model is. So we better understand what people are doing and what kind of problems they're trying to solve. I will talk later about an initiative we're part of where we're working with a RegTech business to try to deliver a SoupTech solution for ASIC where they get federal grant money. So that's the RegTech initiative. And we're also quite heavily involved with a lot of domestic and international regulator information sharing and collaboration. And that provides opportunities for RegTechs as well in terms of what we can share with them. Just to also note on this slide, so what does this mean we're not doing? Well, at present, we're not in a position to certify or recognize or approve particular RegTech models or businesses. Now, this is a common point across the world with agencies, so it's important to note that. We've had limited capacity to be an observer on RegTech trials maybe being used by firms. We've done a couple and a handful, but that is a question mark for the future. And for a period, we did get some special federal funding to conduct some showcases around pain points and RegTech solutions. We haven't been able to do that for a little while yet, but I wanted to just be open and transparent about they're things on our minds, but they're just things at present we're not able to do. But if I move to the next slide, ASIC's digital uplift, a component of this is relevant for RegTech because not only do we as an agency need to be more effective in our job by being through the use of technologies, and we are in the process of going for a federal budget bid for this, and that's public, and that is to solve lots of things for stakeholders as well as for ourselves. But this also includes the use of technologies for supervisory purposes, advanced analytics, AI in various forms and guises. And we're in early days of making use of some of these capabilities in our work. And our markets area is definitely an area that's been probably more mature in use of some of these capabilities. And going to your point earlier, Deborah, quite a lot of that is built ourselves, but in instances it is the case that we will use third-party providers. And I think one thing we're able to do is share our story. So we too can share our experience, where the challenges are, and that this may help the RegTech sector as they deal with the financial firms as well as dealing with ourselves. And this last bullet point here has that word that I know has been raised quite a lot today, and that's procurement. I mean, I have to be clear that when we do wish to engage an entity, we have to go through the processes of going out fairly to the market through proper procurement processes, and AusTender is the way to look out for that. But to some of the points said earlier, our preparation, being as clear as we can be about what we're after, are just small ways that we can try to make procurement work a little bit better for people. But our digital uplift will also have benefits for third-party stakeholders. So that includes the RegTech sector. So our webpage will continue to be enhanced, which will mean machine-readable information and APIs of data sets being made available in ways that are currently not the case, as well as our portals and interactions with firms for reporting purposes and so on are all up for uplift purposes. So this will aid the use of RegTech by firms in supply, in delivering compliance and risk management. So I think our uplift is relevant for a number of reasons. So if we could go to the next slide, please. And this one just quickly identifies some of that engagement that I referred to. So we established our innovation hub function way back in March 2015, and RegTech is a part of it. And this just demonstrates to you just how many interactions we've had over that period. And when looking at the last 12 months, there's still a steady flow. I mean, this flow doesn't stop. There's people who want to talk to us. There's people who want to demonstrate to us what they're able to do. So we appreciate that. If I move to the next slide, this just gives you a bit of a slant of some of the things that people come and talk to us about. And this, I think, also resonates with the survey work that was mentioned earlier. So I think of themes of governance solutions, reporting and workflow solutions, analytic capacities for businesses, monitoring, if not surveillance and compliance. An observation I just make there is I think one big challenge for businesses and RegTech is dealing with subjective problems, misleading or deceptive conduct, unfair contract terms, best interests in supplying services, responsible lending. These sort of compliance issues are really difficult, and I think that is still a journey. Digital ID is something that a lot of people wish to talk to us. We're not probably in the front of center in that, but we're really interested in knowing what is possible there. And as I've noted earlier, and what was noted earlier, is just reporting and RegTech solutions to assist that. So if we can move to the next slide. One of the things that we're involved in, I mentioned earlier, is this BRE RegTech initiative. So we are working with right now a RegTech that's gone through quite a process to be the single one working with us, DHI AI, and they're working with us to assist us in a problem. And this problem is, how can we better identify and assess potential non-compliance by listed entities with their corporate disclosure obligations, including their continuous disclosure obligations? So this comes back again to some of that subjective problem I mentioned earlier. This is the thorny issue, and it involves text analytics, amongst other forms of analytics, across a whole ream of different data sets. So we're working hard with that entity, and we're looking forward to seeing whether a minimum viable product can come out of it for testing with us later this year. I mention it because to us, this is an example of how we can engage with the RegTech sector, and as well as playing back our lessons and learnings through this exercise. And so we'll continue to say a lot about our experience with this initiative in engagements with the sector to come. And my last slide is around international engagement. And this is really just simply to underscore, this is really very important. There are a number of forums that we're involved in, and here are just two. There are plenty of others in the central banking area as well, and they are important for understanding what others are seeing, how they're approaching RegTech so we can learn from each other, being invited to each other's opportunities, including their tech sprints, and we will always let our community know about where some of those opportunities are, and there are plenty of them around the world. So they're just some of the reasons why engagement with international is really important. So I think I'll wrap up there, Deborah. You probably don't have any more time for Q&A. I think I've tried to keep to my time, but I'm happy for you to just go to the next entities, but I'm happy to take any Q&A if there's any that you want to ask.
Yeah, that's great. And we'll just invite people to pop it in the chat, and I can ask it if it comes in before we close off. Thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate you taking the time to join us this afternoon. And the good news is that the next two presentations are two companies in the digital identity space. One is an Australian firm and one is an Indonesian firm. And so we are really looking forward to hearing from them now. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I can invite Peter Villaris to the virtual podium. Thank you. Peter is the Global DPO and the Head of Legal APAC for IDverse. Peter, over to you and your presentation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Thank you very much to RegTech for having us here. IDverse, which used to be known as OCR Labs, is a fully automated KYC solution for ASIC and other regulated entities. I'm just going to talk through quickly some of our USPs and what we're doing about all the deep fakes that we're seeing now. Go to the next slide, please, Nathan. So, there's me. I'm our Global Data Protection Officer, and I head up legal. Next slide, please, Nathan. So, we are, it's fair to say, far and away the leader in Australia for KYC. We own all of our own technology, all built right here in Sydney. So a real Australian success story. We have genuinely world-leading technology, and our international expansion is proving that. Some of our clients who are allowed to name are on that slide. So we've got 3 of the 4 tier 1 banks in Australia. We've got some leading banks globally as well. One of the biggest credit card providers. You've probably got their card in your wallet. So nice and simple KYC process. It's biometric driven. Our USP, which I'll dwell on, is our fully automated document fraud detection. So we never have to fall back to manual agent checks to look for signs of fraud on a document. We detect more fraud than any other provider. I don't say that lightly. That's what our clients tell us. We've been using generative AI to train our document fraud detection for over 3 years now. So we are genuinely next generational. We're ahead of the curve. Next slide, please, Nathan. This is just a quick schematic of a journey you've probably all done with us or our competitors. It's the biometric identity journey. So you use your mobile device to capture a document image. You then do a selfie. And then in the back end, we're extracting the data. We use natural language processing for data extraction. We don't rely on templates. Again, that's pretty unique in the market. I've mentioned our USP of document assessment, and our liveness and face matching is all NIST assessed, and we're one of the top providers for liveness as well. It's all our own technology, and that's key in the modern world because it means we can react to fraud very, very quickly. On to the next slide, please. So, hooray, as any RegTech company will know, getting a case study from a client is like gold dust. So Metro kindly have allowed us to talk about them in a case study. This is on our website, but the highlights are Metro, which is probably Australia's biggest car financing and equipment financing company. They've seen in just 12 months, 500,000 reduction in fraud due to our product. It's quite a remarkable statistic. Return on investment there is enormous. Also reduces their application time for each end user by 5 minutes, they think. And they use brokers, and using IDVerse has allowed them to standardize their KYC approach across all of their brokers, so they have more faith in the KYC done by their brokers. Next slide, please. So this is my final slide, and it's a kind of a reminder to us all to think about risk. ASIC and other international regulators, as we all know, allow a risk-based approach to KYC. Regulators rarely tell you exactly how to do KYC. I mean, the German regulators do, but it's difficult for Germany. Most countries' regulators don't tell you exactly how to do KYC. In the old days, when you had weak evidence, you had to collect several documents, do lots of data checks, etc., etc. But with modern technology, like we provide, you need less evidence if the evidence you get is strong. Under ASIC, the RNEC, the AUSTRAC rules, you can probably rely on just a single identity document, like a passport, coupled perhaps with a DVS check, to do your KYC totally compliantly. But we would love IDVerse to be used by our clients in all their use cases, but obviously, being clients, they never do what we tell them to do. And what we're seeing is that our clients tend to use us for their highest risks of fraud, because they know our technology captures more fraud than any other approach. It picks up much more fraud than a manual reviewer, because these deep fakes producing fake ID documents are very good and will beat any manual reviewer. And in Australia, certainly, it picks up much more fraud than database checks like the DVS can. And I don't say that, again, I don't say that lightly. That's true because as we all know, over half of Australians have had their data hacked, and that all lives on the deep web somewhere. And these deep fakes, there's about 100 websites providing them at the moment, cost about $10, $20 for a high quality deep fake passport. And the websites are great. You just type in your stolen identity details, you put in your image, and it gives you an identity document for about $20 that would pass any manual review. So you need to use a supplier like us who have used AI and generative AI to train our document fraud, to catch AI and generative AI fraudsters. We have staff constantly scouring the dark web, the latest and greatest in fraud tech, these days mostly deep fakes. And when we spot something that's new, we can update our engines in a matter of hours to react to that fraud. And that's the modern way of preventing fraud with KYC. You need a provider who can respond very, very quickly, almost instantaneously. Got my 30-second warning. So the use cases we're seeing our clients use, so Westpac use us for home loans because lots of money there. They'll also use us where they think there's account takeover. It's a kind of step up. ANZ use us for home loans. HSBC Australia use us for credit cards. But my kind of favourite use case is Newcastle Permanent. What they do is when you call up their call centre, rather than asking lots of questions that anyone can fake, they get you to do an ID-verse flow. I think that's all I've got time for. Thank you.
Sorry,
so much.
Peter.
No worries. I'm talking too much.
But thank you very much for coming. That was very insightful. Thank you. Can I now invite Marshall Privadi from Privy ID? Welcome to you, Marshall. We're going to allow you to start with your 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah, and thank you so much for the RegTech Association community. I think we are one of the newest member here and the first from Indonesia. Let me introduce my company, Privy. We are the largest user-centric digital identity company in Indonesia. Next slide, please. Right. So we are solving the problem of that people need to repetitively prove their ID every time they would like to sign up to anything, be it like opening up new bank accounts, applying for credit cards online, opening up insurance policy, or withdrawing their insurance investment funds and stuff, right? So what we are solving here is that the convenience for the users to have a user-centric digital identity, so they don't need to repetitively filling out 70, even 100 fields of personal data on registration forms, giving up their passport, driving license, national ID cards, taking selfie with liveness detection and stuff every time they sign up for something new. And on the other hand, we also prevent high-cost economy in the user onboarding, especially in the financial sectors, so that financial institutions also do not need to repetitively do KYC, customer due diligence on the same person repetitively. So it's a cost-sharing KYC while also improving data privacy and convenience for the users. Next. Yeah, so what we do is that this user-centric digital identities, at first, the user must onboard to Privy, and we perform a bank-grade KYC when the first time they are applying a Privy ID. As the basis of the legality in Indonesia, we are a licensed certificate authority, licensed by Indonesian Ministry of ICT, Information Communication and Technology. So after we perform the bank-grade KYC using all of the technology, like what the ID first has perfectly elaborated, liveness detection, ID checking. But in Indonesia, we are blessed with the national digital identity system, so we could verify up until the facial biometrics of Indonesian to the government database. So we have 99.7% coverage of Indonesian having the national identity card with all of their biometrics recorded, including iris, fingerprints, and facial, right? So we match to that database. Only then we issue a digital certificate along with a pair of public key and private key and a Privy ID account. And once you got a Privy ID account with the digital certificate, you could do two things as an individual. First is to prove your ID when you're applying credit cards online, personal loans online, even opening up bank accounts. You don't need to repetitively type in your data. And the banks, the non-bank financial institution also do not need to repetitively perform the KYC. Secondly, because you got a digital certificate along with the cryptographic key pairs, then the users could also digitally sign any documents, be it onboarding forms, loan application forms, credit card application forms, insurance account opening forms, with the highest non-repudiation factors. It has the highest evidentiary power. Under the EU law, it's a certified, qualified digital signature. Right? So it solves the two problems. First is the legality of the documents being signed, and second is the identity of the person. Next slide, please. Okay. So in Indonesia, we are in a very highly regulated environment. So first is that we are routing to the Indonesian National Route Certificate Authority. We have the official cooperation agreement with the Ministry of Home Affairs to verify the Indonesians' ID up until the facial biometrics. We are also passing the Central Bank Regulatory Sandbox for online credit card application without face-to-face meeting and without any wet signatures on hard copy. We are also registered on the Ministry of Finance so that our digital signature could be used to sign any tax-related documents to the Directorate General of Tax, the tax authorities there. We are certified both for the ISO 27001 on Information Security Management System, as well as ISO 27701 on Privacy Information Management System, which is the closest to the official compliance of GDPR. As of today, we have already, next slide, please. We already have more than 42 million individuals verified owning their Privy ID and digital certificate. And we've been used by more than 2,600 companies, including most of the largest banks, the largest insurance companies, including multinational banks and insurance companies operating in Indonesia, leasing companies, FinTech lendings and stuff. So the unique thing is that with this user-centric digital identity model, it acts as both as the RegTech and SupTech. Why? For example, with a Privy ID app, and you're logging into the Privy ID mobile app, when anyone on our network of the 2,600 companies, right, receive an application or registration, somebody is trying to opening up bank accounts, either using your national ID number, your email, or your phone number, or your face on using a deepfake technology or using a physical mask, then you will get an instant push notification saying that, hey, your face or your ID number is being used to open up bank account in this digital bank. Is it really you? If you say no, then the application will be stopped. If you say yes, then you could proceed and authorize using a Privy mobile app, using the phone biometrics and stuff. On the other hand, for the regulators, they could also enforce any regulation that, for example, in Indonesia, I'll only just finish this with one example, right? An individual could not then purchase foreign currency in cash exceeding equivalent to $10,000 per month, for example. It's hard to enforce without a user-centric digital ID, because every time you go to money changer, you give out your passport, they take a note, you bought $10,000 banknotes, for example. But when you move to another money changer, then they don't know that you have exhausted your limit on another money changer. But with this user-centric digital ID, then it connected to the central bank and the financial service authority, knowing that this unique ID is already doing this transaction, and then the transaction could be stopped by system. I think that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marshall. Really appreciate that. And if everybody could just join me in thanking all of the fantastic speakers that we have had today, including Mark, Tom, David, and Marshall. Thank you very much. This slide has all of the fantastic events that we have coming up. And in particular, you'll notice that our APAC conference has just been launched. So please do have a look at that. We would love to see you there. We will have very limited numbers this time around because we're running much smaller events now, and that's by design. We're really looking forward to seeing you there. We're very, very excited to unpack a little bit more of the research over the next 12 months. And just rounding out, and my final words will be around the importance of people and citizens, and the mum and dads that I referenced earlier are really, really important, and they can be the people that will be able to lead long and fulfilling lives because they've been kept protected in our financial and other regulated ecosystems. Please do pop a ranking in there for how much you enjoyed or not our session today before you go. And I would just like to say now that I'm signing off and calling the proceedings to a close, but please do fill in the poll for us if you can before you go, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.